Welcome back to the channel, welcome back out to the garage, and today we're going to start working on my wife's 1987 Honda Rebel CMX 250, otherwise known as Barney. In the interim, what I've done is I've ordered a bunch of metalworking tools so that I can do a bunch of these projects. My wife and I, we're not professional motorcycle mechanics or fabricators or any of that crap. We're just us out in the garage working on the bikes and, you know, goofing off, having a good time. You could roast me in the comments if you want to, but just bear in mind, I ain't a professional. So if I screw it up, you're gonna see it firsthand, and I'm gonna have to fix it firsthand. And I ain't gonna hide any of that bullshit. I'm just gonna do the work and take you all along for the ride. I'm gonna break this up into little sub-projects. You know, like they say, how to eat an elephant, you one little bite at a time. That's what we're gonna do with Barney. So the first little bit is going to be starting at the back, working my way to the front, and I'm going to do the fender, the rear fender first. That includes making all the brackets, the mounts, you name it, whatever it takes to make it look right and to mount the fender properly. So that's what I'm gonna do. First thing on the agenda here is the radius of Barney's fender. These are stock TC Brother off-the-shelf fenders. I wouldn't say stock, but as in inventory stock fenders from TC Brothers. It's the smallest one I could find, with the width that I wanted, and it has this kind of a, you know, this kind of little duckbill with a center rib on it. It looks real cool. It's like a classic style, but it's the wrong radius. I need to make fender struts. I need to notch the fender on the other side for the chain guard. I need to cut it to length, and keep in mind, I've never done any of this stuff before. I need to re-radius this fender. That's the first job here. So I need to get it out of mock up there, and then, you know, get it over to the shrinker die to re-radius that fender so that it fits the contour of the tire better. And that'll determine where I'm going to cut it and where the mounts need to be. This fender is just mocked up on here. I'm just going to rotate it out. It's that's not rust. That's like a really goopy kind of thick grease that they put on there. And then I've got this little bit of foam padding on here to give me just a little bit of spacing on the fender. So what I need to do now, I think, is I need to clean up the fender, get the grease off of it, and then I need, with a Sharpie, to mark out an interval, because I've got a shrinker stretcher die set over there that I need to use to re-radius this fender. What would the world be without brake cleaner? I gotta get the all this oil off of here so that I can mark it with a Sharpie. So what I did here was I used just this pink eraser because it's about 1 inch wide, and I kind of laid it out along the edge to mark increments there, and then I put X's on every other one. The reason why I did this is because I don't know how quickly my shrinker stretcher dies are going to re-radius this fender, because what I need to do is I need to shrink this edge along these index lines, and that will take it and it will pull the radius of the fender in just like that. Likewise, if it was too narrow, I can use the stretcher dies on the same tool to radius it out. Some people will do the same thing by, you know, taking the edge and kind of pulling it or pushing it in. And you can make tools to do that. This is how I'm going to do it. I really have never done this before, so we're going to try this and see if I don't screw it up. One of the things I had to get was a big ass bench vise because I didn't have one. I've been meaning to buy it for a while. So I got a good quality Yost vise. It is lagged down to this giant piece of black walnut, so it's not going anywhere. One of the first tools that I bought for this project gave me an excuse to get a bench vise because I didn't have one. So this is a massive 6.5 inch Yost vise. It's got a really big throat on it, and I can clamp some serious stuff into it. I've got some soft jaws, I've got some other attachments that I can use to make brackets and whatnot. This is from a company called Kaka, maybe that's how it's pronounced. There's a bunch of different companies that make these shrinker stretcher dies. And what it is, it's blocks of metal, hardened steel, with little jaws, and they'll either pinch the metal closer or they'll push it apart depending upon whether you need to shrink or stretch metal. And it's made for, like, you know, making brackets or making, like, you know, or hand making, I should say, patch panels, like, you know, the fender edge, you got to make a curve or something like that. So I'm using it to re-radius this fender. And I have put an index line on the face of my dies here, and that's going to correspond to the marks on the fender. So I'm going to make a light pass for each one of the X's that I have on the lines on both sides. So I know I've done it, the shrinking the exact same amount on both sides of the fender. And then I'm going to offer it back up to Barney to see if it matches the tire radius. Hopefully I didn't overdo it. I'd rather take them little bites at a time. So like I said, I'm kind of figuring this out as I go. I've had to rearrange how I'm doing this. I'm going to do one of these crimps so y'all can see how much fun this is. It is definitely doing the job, because as this edge here is tightening, because I'm only doing one side of the fender, it's curling up like a potato chip. So because I only have me and I don't have a helper, I actually have to prop this thing on my head, check the alignment on both sides of my marks, and then give it a yoink. And it takes a little bite. And I notice as it's shrinking the edge, it's also flattening it out just ever so slightly. So I'm going to have to go back and rework this edge with a hammer and dolly when I'm done. And I'm trying to line it up off the die the same way each time. So I'm just about done with this side. I'm doing the X marks the spot this time through. All right, that's one side. It is definitely no longer straight. It is definitely shrinking this edge, and I can feel it too. Like I said, I'm going to have to rework this edge with a hammer and dolly, because as it's shrinking it, I noticed it's making like little flat spots along the edge of the fender where the dies have crimped down. But that's not a problem. We can body work that with a hammer and dolly, take those marks out, because I don't want a bunch of flat spots along the edge of the fender. But a little bit of hammer work should be good. Progress report. So I found that tool works the best instead of just trying to reef on it all at once. If you take little bites at it, and you got to bring the die all the way up and then back down, or all the way up and back down. And I ended up going on my marks, and then on every other mark or every other X, and then in between them, and it's close. It is very close. I got a little bit of a warp like this way to take out of the fender. One more pass close up on both sides, and then I'll have to twist the fender to straighten it up, but it's pretty close. It's close enough that pretty soon I'm going to have to chop at the length and then clearance it for the chain, because I won't be able to get it perfectly straight until I can keep it centered. And right now the fender's kind of hitting the side of the chain, because it has to be notched to clear the chain. But if I eyeball this, it's pretty good. I impress even myself. Like I said, I've never done this before, so this is a first. Worked great. All these little milling marks, kind of hear them, where the little teeth came in, these are all going to get sanded out. I'm going to DA this thing down, and any inconsistencies will be taken out with body working, just metal finishing, you know, sand the edge, and then, you know, everything gets a little bit of filler on it when it goes to get painted. Or it's probably not even that many milling marks on there from the tool. It'll probably fill in with just high build primer. But sweet! I spent about 45 minutes in the shrinker, and now I've got this radius so tight it no longer fits. So I actually have to go and swap out the dies, but it's not consistent. I noticed that. And I'm trying to hit all my marks, and I'm doing 4 squishes on each one, and it's kind of a slow process, but I have been keeping the fender square and straight. So if I pull it in where I think it needs to go, I got almost the right radius here. I mean, obviously the bottom half's going to get chopped, but if I pack him down in there, it is just like this last bit It looks like it's too tight, like it's coming down too much here. It's hard to hold it square because the chain keeps throwing it off alignment here. But what I need to do is to go from here, like let's say there, mark it on the other side too. Then mark an arrow here for reference. Like this point here, forward, I need to take this area and stretch it instead of shrink it. You see how much the radius tightened here? And I'm not sure why, because like I said, it's got the same increments on it. It seems to fit. Let me get my head out of the way so you can see. It seems to fit fine everywhere else until I get to the ducktail. So if I stretch it here, I think it'll be almost perfect. And then I just gotta torque it so that it's on alignment. And I might have to take a couple bites of this stretcher or shrinker to get it to want to cooperate. But it's almost square. I laid it on the floor and it didn't teeter. So it's got to be close. So if I just stretch this, got one too many shrinks at the end, it should be good. I think it's because there's different tension on the steel here because of how the duckbill's been formed into it. And maybe instead of this radius coming in at the same rate the rest of it did, you know, maybe it changed it. So not a big deal. I just got to fit it, but cool. That thing works great. So after about an hour and a half switching between the shrinker stretcher dies, marking certain areas of the fender, I've got it pretty damn close to matching my radius. One thing I got to do now, because the fender's still off center because of the chain on this side, I actually have to notch the fender to clear the chain, and also the chain guard, which I'm going to use. So that's going to be the next step here, is I need to cut the fender to length at the bottom. This is about where the back end's going to end up, where the duckbill is just flat. Kind of matches the seat here. But yeah, that radius is pretty good. I've got about the same reveal there. But I'll have to tweak it a little bit, but I can't right now because it's too big. It's as I try to get the radius in one end, it kind of warps because I'm trying to bend too much of it at once. So it's close enough in areas I'm keeping that I can go ahead and chop it, and then I can fine tune it, and then it'll be done. Then I could start building the mounts. What I've done here is this line here. What I did is on the bike. I'll take it here and show you. I laid a piece of flat bar across the exhaust pipes. So that's what I'm using as a line to figure out where the end of the fender stops. Visually, I think that's a good spot to stop it. This is if you're sitting on the bike, it's the left side arm Barney. That's the side with the chain. So I've got a radius here. And this is the area I have to remove to give me clearance for the chain guard. And the chain itself. And then we just swing over here, and I repeated that radius in there. So now all I have to do is just get the death wheel out and cut this off, and then the flapper disc to kind of sand that, and then offer it back up to the bike and fit it. You will not believe, and I don't know why I stress out so much about this, like where here to cut the fender. I was thinking down below, maybe perfectly level with the brake stay or the brake torque arm, whatever you want to call that. So what I did was I decided to be level with the top edge of the exhaust, and that works out on both sides visually. And now you can kind of see this is what I'm using to space the fender out, and it'll come in handy. It'll keep the fender just high enough off the tire that I don't have any clearance issues. And I don't know what I'm doing for a brake light yet. If I need to run the wire under the fender itself, it gives me enough space to run a little wiring loom for the rear stoplight. I'm going to go ahead and start wearing some some nitrate gloves. Main reason is I had to strip off the protective oil on the fender, and I want to minimize how much flash rust I get from just, from my hands. And because I can't see without my damn glasses, I need to have a safety shield on. My eyeglasses have polycarbonate lenses, but it's not enough. So, if you're gonna use the death wheel, be safe about it, right? So I got the rough cut done. Now I just gotta change out to my flapper wheel and then, just clean up the edge and then offer it back up on Barney and see how it looks. All right, so I think I got the grinding done far enough that I'm gonna use a hand file for the rest of it. I don't know why my old chair makes such a such a good project table, but it does. Part of the reason I like doing this kind of stuff, other than the fact that you get to be a little bit creative with it, is that you have to do some problem solving, like, what radius to make this. What I did is I just looked around the garage and found something that looked like it was the right radius. This is a cap from the old, the brake clean here. And so all I did was I marked that dude off, and that's actually what set the radius for here, and for here. Hopefully, I'll put this dude up on Barney here. What I'm shooting for is the end of the ducktail of the fender to kind of come up at the same angle that the seat kind of comes up at. And I think if you look, we're pretty close. I mean, I gotta tweak it. It's not in a final position, and it isn't super critical until I start making fender struts. But now let me fidget around with this and get it to the point where I think it's close, and then I'll have to go back to the shrinker stretcher and then fit the radius for the final time to match the tire. I don't know if you can tell, but that's where I wanted to end the fender, right at the top of the exhaust pipe. So if you come up, you can see that the radius isn't quite right. It's like from here back, I have to shrink that radius down. I do have to be mindful of this edge because I can't shrink from here to where the chain guard is because that edge of the fender's been cut away. So you can see, I got it notched here for the chain guard. It comes down like that. That's to clear the chain. So I can really only shrink, this edge here. So I don't have as much, so I gotta be careful not to warp the fender. Get it square, double check on the chain guard side. And we are centered. And just a little tweak. There we go. That is just about perfect. What I gotta do now is there's a little waviness along this edge here from the shrinker die. So I need to go through here with a hammer and dolly and actually just lightly planish or tap down that edge to straighten it up. And then it should be fit to the bike, it's cut to the right length, it's at the right radius, and it's right where I want it to go. There's so many tooling marks on here that this is gonna have to be sanded and filled with a high build primer after I epoxy prime this, but I don't know how well you can see this in the camera. This edge is not completely flat. So I have to hammer and dolly this out, which is pretty much boring as can be. So let me get that knocked out and then we'll put it back up on the bike for a final fit. Well, this is gonna take a while, but it's what you gotta do. I'm just looking for high spots. I kind of rub the edge of the hammer and it'll kind of make a shiny spot where it's high, and then I take this dolly, one of the two that I've been using that has, this one matches kind of this portion right here, the radius, and I just hold it in there tight and then just tap it down. I take little hits and drags at the same time. Need to make sure that hammer is like perfect, like the face of it can't have any nicks or galls in it, or you'll end up putting those into the metal you're working on. But yeah, I'm gonna probably spend an hour just on this alone. but it's what it takes to make it right. So I went through and I went ahead and I found all the high spots, all the waviness. I hand hammered it down as good as I can get it now. When I clean this fender up and I sand it and then I do the self-etching primer, I'm going to sand it back again and I'll look for more high spots. I'm going to try and get it as smooth as I can without going to body filler. It's going to have some because the shrinker stretcher dies. Can you hear that? It leaves a pretty good edge, like a metal worked edge with a bunch of serrations in it from where the die, the die clamps and pushes the steel together, and that's how it shrinks it, and that's how it reduces the radius or stretches it in this case. Either way. But what I got to do now is I got to clean this off with some brake cleaner, Scotch-Brite it down so that all of these little flash rust marks that are on it, I got to take these off from my fingerprints, because to get the Sharpie to actually do something, I had to strip the protective oil off of here, the grease. And now that, I'm pretty much done with the cutting and fitting phase, I don't want it to flash rust and look like crap. So I'll Scotch-Brite it off with the brown Scotch-Brite, clean it, Scotch-Brite it, clean it a couple of times, and then I'll coat it in WD-40, and then it can sit until the next phase, which is going to be making fender struts and mounts. I'm going to be at this for a little while, so let me continue on, and then we'll catch me on the flip side. I got Barney's fender all cleaned off here and coated with a nice coating of WD-40, so it's not going to rust while I get on with the next step. So come here to the back, and you can see I'm pretty much on center line. This edge here, I need to clean this up. Sand it and square it off, probably file it to make that edge look nicer, and then make this radius a little bit more consistent. But yeah, we got the fender notched with enough clearance to clear that chain guard easily and not interfere with the rear fender. So that is pretty darn good, I gotta say. And that is right where I want it, right where it needs to be. I think I'm gonna need a nutsert tool because I want to make some threaded blind, nut holes here. And to do this the right way, I need a nutsert tool. So I'm gonna order one of those off of Amazon, and that'll give me something to mount the tab that is the rear fender mount without welding it to the swing arm. Because the fender struts and mounts, I want to Cerakote like a dark bronze color to kind of match the wheels, and that's going to be like one of the small trim colors on Barney. So off camera, I made one of these. This is going to be a bracket or a little tab to hold the fender struts on Barney's swing arm. So I got to make another one of these, and I have to make a slightly different version for the front of the back fender because it'll be held in 4 places. Now this is going to get welded onto the swing arm. This was just made from a piece of mild steel bar stock. So I'm going to show you how I made it because I got to make a second one. On a Honda Rebel CMX 250 rear swing arm, it has kind of like this doubler plate that's welded to the back along with this plate here, because this is just a piece of box tubing. And these plates reinforce the back of the swing arm so that when the axle comes in and pinches it, it's got more reinforcement. So I'm going to grind this paint away, and that's going to get welded right there. And I mean, my welds don't have to be too pretty because the factory Honda ones are, okay. So basically I'm just going to blaze it in on the sides and on the front, grind it if it needs to. But I've got these M6 bolts with these mild steel spacers, and I got to cut that to length when I get my final dimensions down because I don't have the washers and whatnot on there. But so that's going to mount like that, and then there's going to be a piece of bar stock, metal bar stock, just round bar, that's going to get welded to this, and that'll form the fender strut that comes up. So I got to make another one of these, and then I got to make the one for the front of the rear fender. This is Hillman. This is just, what is this? 1/8 inch by 1 inch by 3 foot weld steel. It's just mild steel. And all I'm doing is I'm just taking my right angle here, and I'm coming in 1.5 inches plus a little extra. So I'm going to mark where that 1.5 inches is, and then I'm going to take the square on the edge of this. I better unclamp it. So I'm going to take the square and put it along the edge, and then use my metal scribe, because I want to make sure that when I cut it at exactly 90 degrees, because I'm trying to be precise. Double check my length, and I'm good there. So when I go to cut this, when I go to cut that scribed line right there, I'm going to make sure I cut on this side of the line so that I could still see the line. And it's I'm just going to cut it with a Dremel with a fiber cutoff wheel on it. I mean, you don't need fancy tools. I could use the Big Death wheel, but I found that for small stuff like this, it's not really needed. It's probably a lot easier and safer just to hit it with the small one. And then we'll just cut it off. Where is it? There it is. Even with the Dremel, I got to use the safety shield, because the disc could always explode and send shrapnel into my face, and that would suck. That would be a bad day. Holding this with the pliers because it's pretty hot, but you can see that my line is still there. So my 1.5 inch measurement is still true, and I'm going to sand this edge on my mini belt sander to make that exactly the right dimension. I'm just going to use my little combination belt sander here, and I'm going to true this edge up to my my scribed line now that it's nice and cooled off. And before I cut the next one off, I'll also true up the edge on the big piece of flat bar. And I'm trying to make these accurate, so I need to do this to true it up. What I do next here is I take this, this is just a 3/4 socket, and what I'm going to do is I am going to scribe a radius at the very edge of it using the socket. I'll turn it sideways so you can get a better view of it. Let's hold that dude down, get it right in the middle, then scribe it. See? Just like that. So that gives me a line to sand up to, but I want to bend it first. I just have my Yoast 6-inch bench vise here, and I have this. It's a magnetic set of jaws that go in here. You can find these on Amazon, a bunch of machine supply tool companies. They're just a set of steel. I don't know why they paint them. The paint's going to flake off as soon as you use them. They're just it's just a set of steel magnetic jaws that makes a nice little box break, and then you've got this edge here for bending, and you can bend, you know, to the 90 degree or greater than 90 degree. So I'm not really measuring this. I found that for me, for what I'm doing here, if I just line my bracket here up with the bottom edge of this part here, and I make it nice and square, then I get the bend right where it needs to be. So a little faffing about, straight in the vise. Then I just drive it home. this is a really great tool for this. I think Eastwood sells them. I got this off of Amazon. It's made by a company called CAC. Please don't censor me, YouTube. Anyhow, so gives me this. Now I'm going to check this with my square to make sure that it's at 90 degrees. So I'll put that in the square, and as you can see, I've done this enough times testing it. That dude is right at 90 degrees, so that bends perfect. Now all I gotta do is put my radius on there and drill a hole, and I made the sister bracket to the one I just made earlier. Now that I've got this bracket sanded to match the original one that I made, I need to transfer the holes. So all I gotta do is set them back to back, come here, use my little metal scribe, that's part of my combination square, and then I scribed where the outer radius of this hole is, then just mark it, come back through, center punch it, stick it in my vise. I can't believe I waited this long to get a good 6-inch vise. Put this, get a little bit more bite on that dude. A little WD-40. And I need to do a pilot hole. So, pilot hole. Get that guy off of there. Clean up my little drip. Chuck in my M6 bit. More Weasel Whiz. Drip, drip, drip. All right. Then I've got a fluted countersink bit, and I'm just using this to deburr my holes. This one happens to be 5/8. It's got 5 flutes on it, and let me chuck this guy back in here. I'm just going to kiss this enough with the fluted bit here to basically remove the burr that the drill bit left behind, and finish it off a little better. Then we should have a matching finished part. You know, I got to do a little bit of finish work, but the edges are all deburred, and basically they're ready to weld. I do need to put a little bit of a radius on there so it's not so sharp, and I might bevel these edges so that it'll penetrate better when it gets welded. So now that I've made 2 identical brackets, they're going to go right here. But I need to make a bracket for the front, or a tab, whatever you want to call it, for the front of the rear fender. And I'm going to attach it using riv nuts. And I've actually kind of got these guys placed right here, but let me show you what a riv nut is, in case you don't know. It's like a pop rivet that's also, well, a nut, but what it's doing is you can drill a blind hole or a through hole, and you put these little inserts, and these are aluminum. They don't need to be any harder for what I'm using. These are a little easier to work with. They have stainless, copper, all kinds of different materials for the nutsert slash rib nut. You just put it in a tool, and then when you pull the handle on a tool, it will compress the upper edge and mushroom it against the steel that you put it into, or the material, so that it traps it in place and this becomes a captured bolt nut. And that's what I'm doing on Barney's rear swing arm here. I'll space these out precisely later, but because they've got kind of a flange on them, you can't just measure them blindly. You kind of have to figure out exactly where they've got to be centered up. Now I've got to come in here with my center punch and center punch the holes for where the rib nuts are going to go. I have a lot of room to work, but should be enough to get the job done here. And this is mainly so that while I am going to weld something on the swing arm, I want to be able to make the brackets removable so that they can be Cerakoted in a bronze color. Little tabs and brackets are kind of hard to paint and get the paint to stick on there, but a powder coating or a Cerakote is much better. Drill my pilot holes. Hopefully I can get my drill in there. I think I should be able to. Give myself a little bit of weasel whiz here. Barney's getting completely repainted here. This is really just to keep my drill bits from freaking getting destroyed. Alright. Hopefully I can get my bigger drill bit in there. Ooh, challenge. Oh, balls. I'm not going to be able to fit it in. I got a bunch of these. I'm just going to chop it off and make it shorter. I don't recommend this, but even if I take this seat bracket off, the drill still hits the bottom of the frame and I need to drill that. I don't want to take the swing arm off, so path of least resistance, shorten the drill bit. Alrighty, we got those holes drilled. Let me put on my chamfer bit so I can deburr the holes a little bit. There we go. Now I gotta vacuum up my mess. Use the rib nut tool and get him in here. Probably gonna have to come in from the other angle. Just trying to make it easier for y'all to see, but getting it done is more important. So it's the only way to fly, I guess. Yeah, get it square and squeeze. So that's what we're talking about. I got a nice little threaded insert that's pressed into the swing arm, and that's where the fender mount is going to go. Now I have two nice M6 by 1.0 threaded inserts, or nutserts, or rib nuts, whatever you want to call them, that will allow me to make a little bracket, and then I'm going to use the round bar and the little metal spacers to make two attachment points for this side of the fender. Similar process that I used for making these little bracket tabs for the rear fender struts. The front one I did the same way, but it's a little longer so that the nutserts that are on the swing arm, this will bolt to that, and then I'm going to weld additional piece on this end. Those nutserts, rib nuts, are installed now, and I made this bracket just like the other ones are made, and now I've got a removable bracket that will attach the swing arm and then attach the fender. So I now have to make the struts. I've been playing around with this just piece of, like, I'm not even sure what kind of wire this is, but it will hold its shape. So I'm kind of, I've been playing around with different shapes and styles and how I want to mount the fender. And I'm going to do kind of a combination fender strut, like a mini sissy bar for the back fender. What I did was I took this radius, measured it out, It's just about 2 feet. Then I transferred that to a piece of bar stock. This is 2 feet from the end. And the reason why I got to mark the length is because I need to know how far to pass it in and out of my ring roller. And that's what's going to set the radius of this, because it's pretty thick stuff. I'm not going to be able to bend it by hand or anything. And I've got a ring roller, which I bought for making motorcycle parts for other projects. Just cheap Harbor Freight tools, you know. Anyhow, this sets my length. I've already actually made one. Using that little piece of wire and also the 2 foot measured from the end, I came up with this radius from my ring roller, and a little straight piece here, but that's kind of where it ends in the roller. But this will be the starting point for my rear fender strut slash sissy bar for Barney. So I need to reproduce that. So I'll show you how I made this one by reproducing the other side. How I figured out how to do this was, I got my bar stock in here, and I'm starting with the rod basically parallel to the axle for the front roller. And the top roller is just kissing this piece of rod stock or bar stock. Then this is my 2 foot mark here. When I run the bar through the ring roller, I'm going to stop that piece of tape when it just touches this inside roller. And then lastly, I have vice grips here to hold on to the bar. And the reason I'm doing that is because this machine's actually designed for much larger tubing, which is why I bought it, because eventually I'm going to be making tubing for motorcycle frames and doing other projects. But it will work with this smaller metal rod, because as long as I can hold the bar upright and it doesn't move, it doesn't twist, then I should not distort it and I should get a clean roll. And that's the way I did it on the first one that I already showed you. I've got a ratchet up here, and when I made this, my first piece, which has the radius on it that I like, I counted 11 half turns. So exactly that, 11 half turns on the upper screw, and that forces this wheel down, and that's what sets, you know, the radius on your bar stock or your tubing. And the interesting thing about this particular thing is, even though this is pretty cheap and Harbor Freight sells it, there's actually other companies that make different roller dies for this. So you can do box tubing and you can do different style of tubing. So it's a good cheap investment, and it allows you to hand form metal without having to have a lot of expense. I have just enough pressure on that wheel that the bar is engaging the top roller. And I'm going to do my first, let me get the ratchet right, my first half turn. There you go. Then I'm just going to go from where it's at now. I'm going to wheel it to my tape, then wheel it back. I'm kind of peeking through the machine so I can see. I'll make maybe a couple passes on it just to make sure I've got a good start. And I'm keeping the vice grip vertical so that it doesn't want to twist on me. So that's the first one. There's 2. Three. 4. And then this will be 11. Theoretically, bing! Theoretically, if I counted this all out right, I should have 2 matching radiuses. Probably not. Let's see. Yeah, they're pretty close. I think I'm going to have to adjust one of these so that they match each other. I must not have counted right. So after a couple of passes between the ring roller and my Eastwood bar stock roller, I was able to match those radiuses up pretty damn good. This is going to get cut down when I actually go to make the part, the sissy bar fender struts, but that's what I'm looking for. So 2 almost as close as I can get it, identical pieces of steel. So now they got to get the chops so that they fit the spot where they need to be welded up. So the next thing I got to do here is I need to weld this onto Barney's swing arm, and then I have something to use to figure out how I need the fender strut / sissy bar, how it's going to mount, and the angles I got to do. So I guess kind of there's a step-by-step order of operation, and I get to figure it out as we go. And I got the weld area cleaned and protected. So I just got to go ahead and lay down the welds and hopefully don't mess it up. It's time to check. Don't need that anymore. Alrighty, after a little bit of amateurish welding and a whole lot of grinding here, the bracket is on. I do have this little bubble hole here, but I'm not really going to stress out about it because my welds, if you look, my welds are really not any better or worse than Honda's welds. As you can see, so it's at least as good as what Honda did. Now I got some place to mount my fender. What I'm doing here, this will do the job.